So where were the satellite images of the Malaysian shoot down immediately after it happened, if it were so clear? Western fascist apologists like yourselves refuse to be objective and will only look at the least reliable information on the other side, like Pentagon sources and our corporate media, rather than actually hearing experts like Dr. Stephen Cohen and Dr. Robert Perry. Jesus Christ. Come on, man. I'm sick today. You got to lay off with this. All right. You have had your minds made up immediately and have tried to condemn us all to possible Third World War III scenario. We want a World War III scenario. Are you really being honest? Like, you think like
Sam said 100 times though? What is this World War III scenario? What is out? What is the
we are
United
trying
States
to
out
use
to do? What?
Ukraine to instigate Russia to have World War III? I don't. It's just crazy, man. Like, and also incidentally, like, ever on the merits, like, I actually have not supported sending heavier artillery into Ukraine. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I'm slumping in my chair.
You know how easy the United States could ramp up this whole process?
Why don't we just nuke them?
Yeah.
There's your start of World War III. You don't need all this, there's this phone call and this email and that. I'm just trying to look realistically at things, man. I'm sorry. And I have some sense of Russian foreign policy, too. And it has its own. And I read, the reason, I'll tell you, Perry, I'll tell you about Perry. Perry, the things he wrote about Syria, which I do like, I will go up with people on Syria, go up against people on Syria. He wrote the most ludicrous, asinine defenses of the Assad regime I have seen. And that, to me, is a credibility killer. And, I don't know why Cohen writes that Pussy Riot would get executed in 80 other countries for doing what they did. And I don't know why you can't have a conversation that condemns U.S. aggression and poor policy choices and austerity in Eastern Europe, but also note that there's massive inequality in Russia and Putin's exploiting homophobia and extreme religious conservatism and running his own Monroe Doctrine in his backyard. I don't know why. Part of like living is you're able to hold ideas together in your head and you're able to see this is true, but that's also true. It's like, and you just want to talk with people that just have presented this one-sized, profoundly simplistic narrative that relies also, frankly, on a lot of conspiracy theories. And I read and watch Stephen Cohen. I think we did go out to him, and maybe we'll again in the future. But I've seen him say some things that don't make sense to me either. All right, let me try to finish everything you say. You criticize the other side's propaganda when all you have been espousing. Maybe it will turn out the rebels were responsible, but folks like you will have only helped cloud the issue with your irrationally emotional response. Is that really what you want to throw at us? For every piece of so-called evidence you've touted, there are facts on the other side that contradict you. What? Okay.
Fact, just because RT or some other Russian news organization is saying some insane conspiratorial fictional scenario, that's not facts on the other side. I can make up something off the top of my head. You can't say, let's hear both sides. I see proof, photographs, information coming from one side, and just fictional stories coming from the other.
And I could do what Perry does. Like, look, I've read some of his writing. I mean, I'm just talking with regard to Syria, which I found offensive. Anybody can say, I've spoken to former intelligence officials. They've told me any number of insane things. Like what, you're not talking. You have never said, like Matt's saying, you've never said the Russians released this satellite imagery and this rocket launcher was not in the territory that the U.S. and Europe says it is. This flight wreckage was not monitored by rebel troops. It was monitored by this faction of militia that backed the Ukrainian government. You've never said that. So every single thing that comes out, it's always like, okay, we know this rocket was used. It was shot for this reason. The most logical and obvious explanation would be that they mistook it for something else. No one thought they wanted to shoot a civilian airliner intentionally. And that has major consequences because, yes, Russia is pretty recklessly funding these groups and backing these groups and giving them serious artillery and weaponry. Now, does that mean that the present Ukrainian government is probably not also engaged in human rights violations? Absolutely not. And not only that, the first coverage we ever did of the Euromaidan protesters, we did a typology with Serhiy Blaki, who's a real, who's a real Ukraine expert. And he said there are these liberal groups, there are EU groups, there are leftist groups, and there are the far right as well. And they're a real concern, but they all share a concern about tremendous plutocracy and kleptocracy in this government, but more broadly, which implicates leaders, including the pro-European leaders, which I've always said, and that fundamentally what's about to happen, because we interviewed him about a week before the crackdown, is this could turn really violent, and you got to support a social and democratic uprising. And I don't understand for a second why your focus is not in there are leftist Russians protesting Russian foreign policy. They get no support in their country, and they're marginalized and abused. Why are you so worried about figuring out what Putin's perspective is? How about the left-wing grassroots global perspective? That's what I'm interested in. And facts.
But not even just Russia though. The accusations given to us, thrown at us, are always, why are you so for the United States in this scenario? Why are you so for the Ukrainian government in this scenario? And then we could ask you, why are you so for the Russians in this scenario? But you know what? That's not the point. What we're for here is for the Ukrainian people to have their own identity, to be free from Russia's heavy-handed government, to be Ukraine. That's what we are for. That's why we supported the Euromaidan protests. That's why we cover this, and that's why we take in this information and we decide what we decide based on the facts. And all these facts continue to grow our support for the people of Ukraine.
Well, and also, frankly, because I think it's it hurts the left and it hurts people who do anti-imperialist critique to have a faction of people who cannot, you can oppose military intervention in Syria and oppose many U.S. foreign policies in the Middle East and also not need to have some silly conspiracy about it wasn't Assad that used chemical weapons. You can oppose austerity and you can oppose NATO enlargement and not have some crazy, long, elaborate thing with this person called that and this money was fun. Look at the world in its full picture and condemn actions that are wrong no matter where they're coming from, and look consistently to apply your values to situations, period. That's it. And I have to tell you,
and
frankly,
stop siding with a government, too. We talk about this because of the people of Ukraine. We're not talking about this because we love the United States government or we love the Ukrainian government or we hate Russia and Putin's the government. No. That's not what it's about.
Cogent. If you email, look, I just gave you a rundown of everything, of what's happening in Israel, Palestine as best I could. And I was clear about what I thought of all the factions and what's really motivating these things. If you emailed and messaged every single day saying Hamas did order the killings of those 3 teenagers, and here's some journalist that claims it in the face of overwhelming everything else, book him, book him, book him, book him, book him, book him. That's what you're doing. I'm sorry.